Hello and welcome to my booktube channel. I'm Ainsley and this is where we discuss, critique, and analyze, share book recommendations, and do book tags. In today's video, I will be doing the Agatha Christie Book Tag, another part of my series where we discuss any and all things Agatha Christie. And this book tag specifically was originally done by Lily's Vintage World. It looked like it was done about 2 years ago, so I'm really excited to do this for you as I'm a big fan of Agatha Christie. She's actually my favorite author, and I was looking for a few more things that I wanted to do in regards to this little series that I'm doing that isn't just about making book recommendations, and I had some other plans, but I wanted to do something that was a little bit easier to put together for now. But let's just get started and do the Agatha Christie book tag. The first question is, how did you first get into reading Agatha Christie, and which of her books did you read first? Well, I first got into Agatha Christie via watching the while watching Agatha Christie's Poirot starring David Suchet, available on PBS, and I didn't get up into reading her books until I was a teenager. The first book I actually remember reading, and the first one that I actually purchased, was Murder in Mesopotamia, and I do believe that around that same time I read And Then There Were None, which is probably her most well-known novel and often considered one of her best as well. I highly agree with that. But from then on, I just knew that I loved her, not only the character that I came to love on television, but I also loved her writing and the character of Hercule Poirot on the page and what more she had to offer as a mystery writer. The second question is, have you read any books of Agatha and her life? Autobiographies, biographies, etc. I haven't. I've watched some movies about that, but I haven't really read her autobiography. I haven't read any biographies about her. A part of that is simply I used to be a really big fan of those biographies specifically, and I lost interest in those as I got up into my 20s, and I do like autobiographies. I would actually like to read one. Hers, I do think she has one, if I'm not mistaken, but I just haven't got around to reading it yet. Number 3. Have you watched any adaptations of Agatha Christie's books, films, TV shows, plays, etc.? If so, do you have a favorite? I have. Yes and yes. I've watched quite a few of the adaptations of her work, beginning with the original Miss Marple films. I've also watched some of the original Miss Marple series, and I have watched all of the Miss Marple that starred Geraldine McEwen, and I forget the actress's name that took over her places, Miss Marple. The one that made me fall in love with Agatha Christie's work and the character of Hercule Poirot was definitely Agatha Christie's Poirot. Again, it was on PBS when I was younger. Every single novel and short story was adapted in that series, and so that's where most of my love lies, and that's my personal favorite. But I also have watched other television adaptations of her work as well as film adaptations, and I still absolutely love Agatha Christie's Poirot more than anything. Which book of Agatha Christie's has your favorite villain? I think all in all, I am a fan of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, but I don't think, while the reveal and everything that went into that makes for a great villain, I would have to say my personal favorite was probably in Crooked House, just because of it's a lot different. It's different than anything that she's done, and it was quite a shocker for the time as well. And so, yeah, I don't want to give that away for anybody who hasn't read Crooked House, but that's definitely my favorite villain. Number 5 is, which book of Agatha Christie's would you like to read or reread next? I'm currently in the process of rereading by listening to the audiobook of At Bertram's Hotel, which is a Miss Marple book. I'm currently working through all of her stuff again, or every book featuring Miss Marple. But when it comes down to when I get to rereading Hercule Poirot's books, I really think, outside of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Evil Under the Sun, I'm really excited to reread that one. That's one of my personal favorites. And Murder in Mesopotamia. Miss Marple or Poirot? And explain your reasonings about your choice. Also, favorite non-recurring character. So just one from one of the books that you loved. I've really grown to love Miss Marple a lot more as I've gotten older, but I still have to say that Hercule Poirot is my personal favorite. A big part of that has to do with the nostalgia behind it, but I also just love the characterization of him. He is quite cocky, and he knows that he's super smart and intelligent, and that's not something that's really missing from Miss Marple, to be clear. She is very much aware of her smarts and her power, but especially, I think, with the nostalgia behind my love for Hercule Poirot, his attitude and everything just is hilarious to me. And I find that while it can be overdone, and there's some books that it definitely has been overdone, it also just is fun for me. I love that character. I think Hercule Poirot is a very fun character overall, and so I choose Poirot. Ask me again in 20 years. But recurring character, favorite character that's not a recurring character. Oh no, I don't know. Because the character that's really jumping out to me, right now is Ariadne Oliver, but obviously she is a recurring character, and she also appears in The Pale Horse, so it definitely can't be her. I don't know, actually. Yeah, because all of the characters that are really hopping out to me right now do appear in other things. I might come back to that one if it pops into my head. 7. Agatha Christie also wrote as Mary Westmacott. Have you read any of those books? If so, what did you think of them, and were they like her other books? I have not read any of her romance books, but I would really be interested in doing so. I buy a lot of my Agatha Christie from like used bookstores and such, but I would definitely, if I, came across one, or I came across one in the library, which I could just order, I would definitely like to at least read one of them and just check them out. Say that I have, Number 8. There are quite a few books that feature Agatha Christie as the character rather than the author. Talk about the ones you have read and really enjoyed. If you have not, then would you like to? In the series, it features her going back in time, and she's a big Agatha Christie fan, and she actually meets her prior to her publication, and I don't know if she appears in the book, but I am planning on reading that book at some point, so yeah. I need to look up what books Agatha Christie features in as a character. Do you have a favorite Agatha Christie book that you find yourself turning to again and again? Yes. The Body in the Library is the one that I go to again, featuring Miss Marple. And then, of course, there's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd and Evil Under the Sun featuring Hercule Poirot. And I really like Ordeal by Innocence, which is a standalone novel of hers and one of Agatha Christie's favorites. So those are the ones that I could really read time and time again. Oh yes, and also Halloween Party, that being a seasonal book. You can read it every season, baby. I mean, it's always spooky season, so do what you will, but that's a spooky season one for me. Number 10. She is known as the Queen of Crime. Suggest another female crime author whom you like to read. Anne Cleves. This is actually her first book featuring Detective Matthew Venn, and I believe there's a second book either out or coming out. She is most known for her Shetland series as well as the Vera Stanhope series. These are both works of detective fiction, and what I really like about the introduction of Matthew Venn is he is actually a queer character. He's an out gay male, and Anne Cleves is really good at creating characters who are, I don't really know, they really kind of, they exist in the vein of someone who, of course, has problems, I guess, quote unquote, similar to, say, Morse or any of those other characters, because often that makes an interesting protagonist, an interesting detective. And she does a really good job, too, at doing that, but not being so overwrought with all these idiosyncrasies, which I find can also be a very big problem, especially when you had a character like Sherlock Holmes and the things that people do in adaptations and what they want to bring to the character of Sherlock Holmes. And then, of course, you have Hercule Poirot, somebody who has a lot of those as well. I believe if he was, not saying this is his diagnosis, but he seems like someone who has OCD, possibly, or just anything, a set form of anxiety that he feels he has to compulsively make things in order. And I feel like this also comes very much across in Anne Cleves' books as well, whatever that is. So I don't want to give too much away because I think so much of these books really play into these incredible characters while also having the beautiful settings of these books play a really big character as well. So if you haven't read any Anne Cleves, I highly recommend that you do. Do you prefer the Golden Age style crime book or prefer a more modern take? I have fairly recently, over the course of maybe the past few years, have been getting more into more modern or slightly more modern detective fiction books, but I'll always have that connection to and will always be drawn back to the Golden Age. And I do think that, that's definitely my preference, just because that's my good old cozy Golden Age mystery. It's the comfort place for me. But I am really getting into more modern stuff. I'm not the biggest fan of the books that Midsummer Murder is based on, just because of some of the characterizations in those books. But I am really getting into, MC Beaton's books. I also really like her. She does really good at like kind of cozy comedic mysteries. And so if that's your thing, I really recommend MC Beaton. And what is this one book that I will put it right here, that I really want to read, and I really want to read this author's work and more of hers, because she seems to write kind of cozy, silly stuff. And I also want to diversify a bit as well. I feel like my interest in mysteries has unfortunately been Wonder Bread, so I'm really, really needing to do this. If you have any recommendations for mystery authors, whether that be ones from the Golden Age or more modern authors, I would really love to hear from you. If you wouldn't mind commenting below with some of your favorite and any ones you think I would like, please do. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more from me, give it a like and subscribe and ring that bell to be notified every single time I post if you want to. If you have any questions or things or recommendations, something that you want me to do here regarding any other book video or one featuring Agatha Christie, please feel free to let me know, and I will see you next time. Bye!